Hey Gardener, Taylor here from the Community Garden Podcast. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to provide you with some housekeeping items before we get started. If you're new to the podcast, every week, every 2 weeks, the beginning of the podcast gets updated. So the information that I'm delivering to you right now is relevant and will be removed when it's no longer relevant. So if you've already heard this, if you're binge watching or binge listening, fast forward to about 5 or 6 minutes and we'll launch into the actual episode. So for today, it is currently the week of October 20th. And for folks in the Northern Hemisphere or for folks who are in similar zones, I'm in zone 6B and my first frost date is supposed to be early October. It's now October 20th and we still haven't actually had a frost, but the plants are starting to be damaged from the cold. We're getting about -3 degrees Celsius overnight right now, at least tonight. So we're pretty much done in the garden now. If you haven't had a chance, go into your garden and just remove. Actually, you could technically leave your entire garden, but if you're planning to remove anything from your garden, go ahead and snip the plants at the base. Don't actually pull them up out of the soil as long as they weren't diseased. You can go ahead and let them break down into the soil, and it also helps with better water access for next year, getting water down into the soil, and will help a little bit with soil erosion. If your plants were diseased, pull them out fully. You can also leave all of your plants over winter. You do not need to take them out of your garden. Don't let anyone make you think so. So now that we're done with the season, there's likely nothing else coming out of your garden. I still have a few loofahs, some flowers still going, a couple of small things, but for the most part, the season is over, folks. So my suggestion to you over the next couple of weeks, this will probably be the last time I update this until realistically November, December. I would really love for you to make notes about your gardening season. Please, please, please journal. Write down the things that you learned this year. Write down the things that you want to do differently next year. Write your observations down. Write your questions down. Write all your ideas down. Spring you will thank winter you, okay? Please. Also, as you're out in your garden mourning its loss, if you see any seeds that have matured, you can go ahead and pop them off your plants. Marigolds are a really fun way to save seeds. You'll wait for the seed heads to, become dry and crunchy, and they usually turn black. You can go ahead and pop them off. You can store them in a paper bag. There's lots of fun plants to pull seeds off of. Snapdragons, the little heads turn brown, and then they have little holes in the top, and you can flip it over and shake the seeds into your hand. Another fun one is coriander or cilantro. It's very obvious when the seeds are ready, so take a peek at the plants that are still in your garden, see if you can pull any seeds off them. Also, this is for anyone listening to this podcast. If you've ever thought about organizing a community garden, requesting a community garden in whatever area you live in, now is the time to start thinking about that if you have any sort of winter break. So right now, we're not going to be gardening now until March, April. So we do all of our prep work during the winter months. So this is when we take new garden requests. This is when we assess new sites. We discuss partnerships with different organizations. So if this is something that you have been personally wanting to do or your organization has been wanting to do, now is the time to start prepping. Okay, let's talk about some local activities. So these are folks who are in Southern Ontario. You live in Brantford, Brant County, Hamilton, Haldimand, Norfolk, and you want to get involved with our organization. We have a couple of things coming up that I want to put on your radar. So we are participating in the Brantford Santa Claus Parade. November 30th, we are having another parade float. Last year, we had a really fun 50-foot parade float. One of our volunteers, Ken, built a massive greenhouse on the float. I made a bunch of vegetable costumes. They were like sandwich board costumes. It was so much fun. The float definitely was DIY, but it was so cute and we really had a blast doing it together. So we're going to be doing it again this year. If you want to participate, our parade committee is going to be meeting on October 20th in the evening virtually, and you can get that link from me by emailing grow@egcgbrant.ca, or you can take a peek at our show notes page for the podcast and click the Contact Us button, and that would be the communitygardenpodcast.ca. So Santa Claus Parade, come join us. You get to dictate how much time you can give. You do not need to have any experience. Next thing, so this is very exciting. A couple of years ago, we hosted an Earth Day Community Garden Building Festival. Nope, Earth Day Community Building Festival, and we're going to be kind of re-envisioning that festival as a garden festival this year located at the Greenhouse and Learning Center. It'll be the grand opening. So that'll be happening in June of 2025. It's now all hands on deck to get this festival planned. So if you want to volunteer with us on the committee on the day of, whatever the case is, email grow@egcgbrant.ca or go to the show notes page. We're also looking for organizations who want to participate in an educational way or, have some sort of offering day of. So if you work in the horticulture, green space, environmental, gardening world, and you have something educational to offer or something of value to offer during the festival and you want to promote the organization or you want to participate, reach out, please. If you have ever thought about joining the board of directors for Eagle Ground Community Gardens, we will be having our annual general meeting in January. This is just something for you to start thinking about now. We're always recruiting for director positions as well as for committee lead positions. So I will update this when we have the final date, but our AGM's in January, and just start thinking maybe you want to get involved on the back end. We also are hosting a tree planting event at the new greenhouse site on November 2nd at 10 a.m. So you can come. Please ensure you are wearing closed-toed shoes, although it's a little too cold to be wearing sandals anyways, and consider bringing a shovel and some drinking water. We're going to be planting a permaculture orchard. This will give you a good opportunity to see the greenhouse, to see the park before maybe other folks have been able to. Also, Belonging Brant, we mentioned this in episode 8 with Armanda Lambert. Belonging Brant is hosting the ABCD Symposium for 2025 in May, and we are currently planning for the symposium. We're looking for community members to come join our committee. So if this is something that interests you, you want to learn more about ABCD, asset-based community development, shoot me a message. And finally, for my organizations that are listening, I have a couple of recommendations for you. If you haven't gotten to it yet, episode 9 with Roger Doran is about seed money. It's a fundraising platform for community gardens. It is a global platform. Please check out that episode and register for a seed money campaign. Your registration has to be in by November 12th, and then the campaign for anyone listening runs from November 15th to December 15th. And look into all the campaigns that are running and please consider donating. There is an Ontario Agriculture Infrastructure Grant due October 31st. If you've ever thought about building a greenhouse with your community garden organization, this may be a grant opportunity for you. And if you just Google Ontario Agriculture Infrastructure, it should come up. It's due by October 31st. There's also a grant right now through the Ontario Trillium Foundation. It's their Grow Grant. It's due by November 4th. And this allows various organizations to sustain their operations. It has nothing to do with gardening. But if you have been looking for an operations or a programming grant, this may be the grant for you. So I just wanted to share some of these pieces with you. I apologize. This is a little bit longer than normal. It's because I love to talk. Yeah, we're at 8 minutes. So I'm going to let you go. We're going to get into the episode now. I hope you enjoy it. As always, you can always reach out to us at podcast@egcgbrant. You can reach out to us through the show notes page at the communitygardenpodcast.ca. Email me, message me, send us a message on social media. I'm always happy to answer questions and help you out. Okay, let's get started. Hey gardener, you're listening to the Community Garden Podcast. I'm your host, Taylor. In this space, we'll dig into the dirt with local gardeners of all skill levels to share tips, tricks, and stories from our gardening adventures. Let's get growing. Hey gardener. Before we dive into today's episode, I just wanted to make a few notes about some things that we hear about during this episode. I'm very excited for this one. Armanda brings a very interesting take on how to spruce up your garden, how to bring art into the garden, and how to appreciate your space in it through a different lens. So I loved hearing everything that Armanda brought to this interview. Armanda is a huge community player, and we've now come across each other in quite a few different groups and event committees. And so when we were seeking out podcast interviews with local gardeners, I was incredibly delighted to see that Armanda's name had popped up. So during this episode, we talk a lot about inspiration for bringing art into your garden. We talk about the value of community I know we're a community garden podcast, but it really comes up a lot in this episode as it has in the last few episodes. We also chat a little bit about the neighborhood associations. Regardless of whether you're local or not, we highly, highly, highly recommend that you look and see what type of committees or associations run your neighborhood or contribute to your neighborhood. Community organizations or associations often host events in your neighborhood. They often contribute to the overall vibe of the neighborhood. Sometimes they run mass yard sale days, or in my neighborhood, we have a really cool art crawl every year at different locations. Parties in the park. There's usually lots going on in the neighborhood. So definitely look and see how you can get involved, see how you can lend a hand, or at the very least, participate in these events. I have included information about Brantford's neighborhood associations in the show notes. There's a ton of them. If you live in Brantford, you likely have an association tied to your neighborhood, or there's one nearby. So look into it. We also chat about art and education for families and how you can get children involved. And also we chat a little bit about how we can use art to deter pests in the garden. This is something that I really have never considered before, so that was a very interesting take. We mentioned Branching Out Brantford a lot, and I have mentioned this organization in previous episodes. I apologize if this is repetitive information, but if you're new to the podcast, Branching Out Brant comes up a lot. I think we need to get them on here. They are an organization out of Brantford, Brant that offers a tree registry. So homeowners, businesses, and organizations can register fruit trees with them. And they'll come to your home or wherever the fruit tree is located, and they'll harvest for you. They'll help you prune it. And then a lot of that food gets distributed. So a third goes to the owner, a third goes to the volunteers, and then the third usually goes to a food bank or a pantry. They also glean, so they often get invitations to spaces that are growing food to come and harvest, and then they distribute that as well. Branching Out Brant does a lot of great work in the community. You can volunteer with them. I'll put their information in the show notes. And if you're not local, check to see if there's a gleaning club in your area. Gleaning, gleaning. Yeah, let's dive in. Let's hear about how Armanda uses art in her garden. Hello, Armanda. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm good as well. I'm so happy to have you here today. So excited to chat with you. I know we got some good stuff on the schedule. If you want to dive right in and actually just introduce yourself, talk about your relationship to the community here in Brantford, and if, any basic gardening setup you currently have right now.
So my name's Armanda Lambert, and currently I am the chair of the Eastward Echo Place Neighborhood Association, which I take great pride in because I believe that community is like a household. If you live in it, you contribute to it, and that's what makes it a strong and really viable situation. And with the stats on loneliness that the government released last year, I think there's a lot we could do through neighborhood associations and community endeavors to help reduce the amount of loneliness, mental health issues there are, because there's something to be said by having a friend or someone to speak to every day. And so it's not just about having purpose myself, but it's affecting positive change. And it just makes me very proud. I got a great team of people to work with. So I'm privileged and lucky to do so. Otherwise, I've been in Brantford for about 21 years. And I've been living here. I had a plan of 2 years, but then I had children. And it was such a great town. It reminded me of some of the things I had at home. And it was kind of a beautiful city to raise my children in.
That's amazing. So you've been in Brantford for 21 years. How long have you been on the Echo Place Neighborhood Association?
This is my first year. So what's really funny is I'm very involved in my neighborhood regardless of titles and such. So I spent many years supporting their events, and I knew a lot of people on the committee. I used to live in Homedale, and I knew a lot of people on their committee. And so when I watched the neighborhood associations be developed, it was a thrilling thing for me to have witnessed. And so I was volunteering for a lot of things or going to photograph people because I do photography on the side for the events that they were holding, and then just trying to keep what's current in town and take pictures of things I could access, be a protest or what have you. But through doing so, I've been photographing them for as long as they've existed. And it was high time I put my pants on instead of just volunteering all the time leisurely. I thought it was time that I should just honestly commit myself fully.
Yeah,
So
and
this is my first year.
amazing. For folks who are just listening, in Brantford specifically, there are 23 active neighborhood associations, and there is a map on the City of Brantford's website, as well as contact information for each of the neighborhood associations. Armanda sits on the Echo Place Neighborhood Association, and I also personally sit on the Homedale Neighborhood Association. And then Equal Ground will work with neighborhood associations with either the creation of community gardens or support for existing community gardens. So, for example, we were just at the Brantford Station Neighborhood Association meeting recently, packing pollinator seeds with them to give out to their communities. We recently just opened up Edith Montour Community Garden in West Brant with the Shellard Lane Neighborhood Association, as well as Prince Charles Park. We opened a community garden with the Neighborhood Association, Prince Charles Neighborhood Association as well. So if you are a neighborhood association listening and you want to partner with Equal Ground, it's absolutely an opportunity. Please reach out. If you live in Brantford, both Armanda and I highly, highly recommend that you reach out to your neighborhood association to either offer casual assistance, to get to know the folks that are running events in your community, or to even potentially join the association itself to help make decisions and help plan events within your community. So it definitely makes a big difference. And I can see Armanda shaking her head, yes.
And I would add to that is please just feel free if you don't have time to commit to doing charity work or you don't want to have the time to volunteer. It's something to sponsor events. That's also an opportunity where people could give back. And another great opportunity to give back is just being there and enjoying the events we're bringing and letting us know that you like them or what you'd rather see. It's we work for the neighbors,
Yeah, there's a lot.
not the city, but the city supports us. And then we have you coming soon to install a greenhouse in our area.
Yes, we
If you want to
do.
brag about that, I've been bragging to everyone about that. I think it's a great initiative.
Yeah, so yeah, I echo everything you said. And also, like, even if you don't live in Brantford, there's likely some sort of neighborhood association or some sort of neighborhood group, regardless, honestly, regardless of where you live, unless you're quite literally in the middle of nowhere. So it's definitely worth checking out. Yeah, so Equal Ground is installing our greenhouse and learning center in Echo Place. So it'll be located at Woodman Park Community Center, which is off of Gray Street. The greenhouse is being built now. I actually drove by 2 days ago and the gazebo is up, which is really exciting. In addition to the greenhouse, there's also the Woodman Pool that just got completed and had their grand opening. There's a gazebo and learning space going in. There's a playground that's going in. And we also were just notified from Tree Canada that they are funding the cost associated with putting in all the fruit trees and bushes, and those funds come from LCBO. So that hasn't been officially announced, but that's really exciting because it allows us to kind of hone in on what we're planting and have more of a community focus when it comes to the edible fruit trees and bushes. So it's a really exciting project. It's supposed to be opening probably in August, but you know how it works with simple construction, so that may be shifted a little bit. But we're really, really excited, and yeah, it's coming to your neighborhoods.
And I'm excited about that as well because we are a forward thinking neighborhood association, I would think, and a forward facing town. And we're trying to grow as well alongside of our community. And the great thing about the park as well as the pool is that it's fully accessible.
Mm-hmm.
For myself, I have a grandson who's got 21 deletion syndrome. So this park will actually allow him at Woodman to play alongside his sister and not have to feel excluded and sit on the outside. So there's a great deal of pride that's coming out. And it's a good time for me to be a chair of a neighborhood association in this region. That's for sure.
Yeah, I
You're
imagine
making
that's
us look
exciting.
good.
I just want to make a quick note about the play structure that is now located at Woodman. So, since I recorded this interview with Armanda, the site has been fully built. The community garden is in, the concrete pad's ready for the greenhouse, and they have actually wrapped up the play structure. And originally, Armanda was talking about how accessible it is, and I just, since seeing it, I don't I don't think it's that accessible. So it is a play structure that's geared towards older children, youth specifically because it is a youth hub. So, kids between the ages of 8 and I mean, all the way up to 16. It is very much a climbing structure. There's actually no slides, there's no traditional play elements to it. There is quite a few opportunities for play on the ground. So it definitely is accessible for folks that may not actually be able to climb, but I don't want to leave you with the impression that this entire site is accessible. It's very much a climbing structure. I don't even think there's like stairs or anything like that. So definitely geared for the older kids. You probably wouldn't want a younger kid using all aspects of this park. So I'll leave that with you. The greenhouse space in the community garden is also fully accessible. It's our first fully accessible space. And while we are working to upgrade all of our spaces to include raised beds and things like that, this space specifically is intended to be accessible for every person, which is incredibly exciting. And we're really glad that the city has made that a priority with us. So yeah, the entire site fully accessible, and they're also upgrading the community center there. So if you live in Brantford, you're going to have to come check out the space in the next couple of months as things ramp up and all these amazing community pieces get put in place. And then, of course, it's in a really great area. There's a brand new construction area nearby with a lot of newcomers to Canada that live there. It's directly next to an elementary school. It's also across the road from co-op housing, city housing, and then, of course, there's Friendship House down the road, which is a church that provides a lot of services for folks who need it, things like pantries, clothing pantries, hot meals. And then there's also hospice down the road too, which is exciting. They have beautiful gardens there. So maybe there's a partnership there. So it's in a really, really great space to be able to serve a variety of people and a variety of needs. So we're really excited to be located there.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if you are willing to maybe dive in a little bit into your background in gardening. How did you get started? What's your gardening origin story?
Okay, so my gardening origin story would be childhood, I guess. I was born to a family that my grandparents had 8 children and they had to feed them. And they were new to Ontario, so to speak, in that they were French speaking from Quebec. So there's an adjustment when I myself was only French when I was a child. It took me a while to learn English well. And that was a part of us. And we went to the grocery store essentially only for meat because we had such an immense garden in their backyard. And so I started very young, learning how to germinate, how to preserve, and how to. So for me, it wasn't looked at like a hobby. It was a way of life, and it was something I had to adjust to when I moved to this apartment, for instance, because my garden is a lot smaller of a space than I used to have. And so I started gardening very young, and my grandfather he was awarded quite a few trophies for his rose gardens. He specialized in roses, and they were wrapped over the entire house and around the house. And I remember as a child what an enchantment that offered me with my imagination and what a peaceful place it was to enjoy. And it started my fascination. And when we moved, lucky for me, I had a horticulturalist live next door, and although she didn't like anybody on her land, she got sick of me spying. So she took me in and she would give me lessons on how to grow the plants she had. And so I was very privileged with the people I'd met through life. And I've been able to explore various ways of gardening. And during COVID is when I got a little bit overboard with it. I do love plants. And until then, I would only plant things that you can eat. I wasn't as lucky with flowers, but everything was so expensive to eat that I just started germinating all of our food and any plant that was given to me. So if somebody gave me a bouquet of flowers, I would go back to my old school knowledge. I still germinate now. I still got all the seeds from whatever I ate last week
That's amazing.
because old hat.
Yeah, so you save the seeds from what you can. It's a really great skill to have, and for anyone listening who's looking to be a little bit more self-sufficient, seed saving can be a really big step in that direction. So do you currently garden now in the space that you're in, or do you utilize the community gardens, anything like that?
So I found that a community garden was difficult for me to maintain, and I haven't done it in years. It was much when my children were younger, I did it for them. So they would have the same opportunities I did. I come from a French background. And in kindergarten and pre-kindergarten, you learn how to garden. That's a necessity in what you learn. And so by grade 2, you've already grown at least one plant yourself, right? And I think it's a great basis for education on understanding what you eat as well. So I had gotten a community garden for my children so they would have something to do during the summer with the babysitter, but they didn't go very far with it. So I've discovered that's not the best thing for a family. I need something that when it's late at night and I come home from meetings or what have you too late, the plants can still be cared for by me. And I do have a garden in my backyard this year, which is the first year I've done it. I had laid brick down during COVID. And so now we have beans. I'm a big fan of beans. I got some tomatoes from you, and they're doing very well. I got some morning glories. I've got some ginger. The second people saw that I started putting plants outside and not just inside the house, we were very fortunate. I put on Facebook, we really wanted cucumbers and we were having trouble sourcing them. And somebody delivered, a beautiful woman named Lynn. She came down and she brought these plants and said, hey. And so we have potatoes, cucumber, and this tiny little apartment at Brantford.
That's amazing. If
It is.
you're still looking for plants, we have lots of peppers and eggplants right now beside the shed at Earlhag.
Oh, I would love some of those.
Yeah, you're welcome to help yourself. Just head down to Earlhag whenever you're ready and you'll see them there kind of beside the shed. There's lots. Yeah. So you kind of had mentioned that, so you're located in Brantford, which means your growing zone is 6B. Your frost date is early May. We're kind of in a similar situation. That's what most of our interviews have been. What do you do, raised gardening, or do you garden in the ground? I'm just curious about your soil conditions.
So I have weird soil. What I'll say is until I put the bricks in, I let that yard be a forest. As I enjoy forest equally as much and the privacy from them equally as much as I enjoy food. And so when I did dig in, it was very lots and lots of roots, tree roots in there, and it's very clay. For some reason, this area has got a lot of clay.
Interesting.
And it's challenging mostly because of where we're situated. Our biggest problem, I would say, is sourcing sun time, and being aware of where the sun falls is our biggest advantage and disadvantage in some cases.
Yeah, I guess if you have large fences or anything like that, it's a little bit tricky. You got to find the right timing and kind of watch the sun path. It's hard in the winter because the sun path changes. You got to watch the sun path, into spring to figure out where things can be accurately placed. But then at the same time, you have a little bit more shade to focus on things like greens and stuff that are going to bolt very quickly in the direct sunlight and in the heat. So, like you said, pros and cons to both. So you had mentioned that your experience included expressing art in the garden. And I'm curious, what, if you can dive into that a little bit and give us examples of what that can look like and even potentially how that can be done in a group setting.
Oh my. So I have done lots of art in the garden. It's, I would say, compulsion, I guess. So I can't help myself. It's how I express. And so to me, seeing a plant, it deserves the love of being adored. So I will include, for instance, instead of just using, I call them trailing strings, I tie them to my lattice and then I just wrap them around the plants to teach them where it is so they can feel it. And I put little bells and chimes on each end because if the squirrel hits it, maybe it'll startle, but also it allows for the plant to feel it. So what I have is all these beautiful yellow, orange, red strings going through the garden. I've recently put, and it sounds ridiculous, but it's simply easy to do. My daughters had given me butterflies that were made out of jewels when they were children. So I put them on our lattice and I used a hula hoop to look like their flying area. And then I carved a few pieces of wood, for instance, because I am quite a snail lady.
Oh,
And so I carved some snails out of wood and I used rocks as their shell. And then I adorned them in crystals. And I tend to use a lot of bells in the garden. So we have a little girl, she's made of orange. She's a little scarecrow and she moves regularly. And there's a purpose to that. And our male one just sits out in the garden and he's the security. What it's done is made the children in my neighborhood quite inquisitive. So for me, it sounds ridiculous, but without art, you can miss a piece of the education. So what's happened is I've had families that stop who would have never previously had a reason to speak to me because they want to pull their children away because they're so enchanted by the view of the garden, right? And so I do hang crystals. I've taken bark of trees and made heart shapes. We try to keep everything to look like it's organic from the same environment. I'm lucky that my fiance and I, when we were children, we used to forge together. We grew up in the same neighborhood. So we've been gardening together for years. In fact, when I was a child and I wasn't allowed to have a garden, he would grow one for me and then pick the flowers and bring them over. So
Oh my
I would
goodness.
then in turn give him art paintings as a thank you. And so we kind of always have been creating in our garden. And so now, for instance, we take turns and we move the orange girl. So then the kids will come running and go, "Why'd she go there today?" And I'll say, "Oh, today she's just trying to help out that little flower because it's not having as good of a time." And what I found is they're so curious. They want to touch it because most people say, "Don't touch the garden." They want to touch it, but they're afraid to. And so when you say, "Hey, you won't hurt it. Go ahead. Do you wanna help with this one?" They all join in, and so for me, it's a way of allowing our future generations to learn in a hands-on way, but what attracts them there is the look of that garden, that it's inviting to them, and that there is little weird things, and the snail has a double purpose. Everything that's in the garden does help as well, and the great thing about it is the snail is also, because I made it out of sticks, helping keep plants straight up and giving them the space to wrap. So it's hard to really explain without showing you, but
Yeah,
there's just
we'll have to get
details
some pictures from
everywhere.
you and toss them in the show notes.
That would be great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll get close-ups. I have them already, but yeah, so we put different creatures in. So snails tends to be the theme this year. Last year we had a pumpkin theme, so this year we have 5 pumpkins growing, and that's our homage to that pumpkin. But yeah, so our biggest dilemma is the squirrels. So most things are there with the intention of that. So we'll create things, if nothing else, for the overall purpose of keeping the squirrels out. But it makes noise. Anything that makes noise gives me joy because at least it'll alert me if a raccoon's around or a bunny or, and we tend to have a lot of those because we're near railroad tracks. So I guess my point is I think that it's freedom for myself. It's another way for me to enjoy my garden by putting it in there. And there's so many things you can make. I have made carvings out of sticks I found and included them in. I've used rocks. I've seen, actually, we have in front of us a lot of painted rocks as well. One of my neighbors did. And actually, we have a garden that we share just on our street together. And it was a group effort in that one of my neighbors built it and the rest of us planted in it. And it's become something that we all share together. And from that, I now have 3 other neighbors who never grew before that are growing this year. And although they can't commit to things like Branch or Brantford, where they go and they do a tree registry, they can't necessarily come with me. They don't have the physique to do it. They are cheerleaders for us, maybe secret ones, but they're out there and they'll peel the plants and stuff and they're asking and they're getting involved. And now they're finding more ways to do it at home. But I find that it's also given us a community.
Mhm.
And that I take walks. I met a wonderful lady named Diane, and she lives in my neighborhood, and she's on the Brantford Gardening Association. And she was asking how she can get more involved. And it's as simple as that, as I stopped to say, I adore that little decoration. And so for me, that helps the loneliness factor that we're trying to remove and the fear of speaking to one another.
Yeah. That's the beauty again of community gardens is it is bringing you into a common activity and it is giving you that community aspect and exposing people to, an art form that maybe they would never have tried on their own. They're able to wander into this community space and try things out a little bit more than again, they might not have chosen to do on their own. But you and I were both at the ABCD symposium that Belonging Brant and Community Living puts on every year this past May of 2024. And Tara was doing a bit of an intro to ABCD, which is asset-based community development. And she had told us a story about how when Belonging Brant had first kind of gotten started, and for folks who are listening, we'll put the information on both of these organizations in the show notes and you can check it out. Tara had told us that they were walking in the Brantford Station area and they had come across this house that essentially had a very similar concept, a very inviting garden. There was artwork, there was a free little library. Now there's a free little art library. They had just this beautiful space, and it was on their front yard. They were very obviously community-minded folks, and Tara and the people that she was with made the decision to actually go knock on the door, introduce themselves, and ask about the garden space. And that ended up being Chad, who is the chair of the neighborhood association. And I saw a photo of it, and then the other day I went to drop seeds off to Chad. So I went to this house that Tara had been talking about. And I pulled up and I was like, "Oh, that's the house. It's right there. It has to be this house." And I couldn't believe the inviting space that Chad has created. And it's same concept. It's very inviting. It screams community. It screams, "Come see the space that I'm working on. Come enjoy the space. Come ask me questions. Come take from the little library, take from the art library. Come see the work that people have, contributed." And like you said, I just think there's something very community focused when you see spaces like that, and also a little bit less scary, right? You said the children in traditional gardens are sometimes told, "Don't touch, stay out of the garden, not for you." But in spaces like this, it makes it more inviting. It piques their interest. It can rev up their imagination. When I was a kid, this is actually something I had completely forgotten about, and something I never include in my garden origin story until you started talking about it. But my grandmother in London had this really small but beautiful little English garden in the back, and I used to help them garden all the time. And when I was at her house, I'd spend weekends there. I love to read. I have a raging imagination as a kid. I used to she'd give me all her pretty dresses, and I'd put on her pretty dresses, and I'd go run around outside like I was in the secret garden. And I was never told to stay out of the garden. I was always allowed to interact with the plants and interact with the space and the trellises that were there and the fencing that was there. I was always able to interact with those things. And again, I think that brings a positive association with nature and a positive association with these gardening elements, and being able to invite people into those spaces and invite children into those spaces, it can really make a big difference.
And seems how you mentioned that. I'm from the Niagara region originally, and so there is the secret garden right near the falls.
Hi, it's me. I looked into this secret garden at Niagara Falls, and I'm pretty sure it's Queen Victoria Park. So this is located directly across from like where you would go to view the falls on the Canadian side. So folks, Brantford is about an hour and 15 minutes from Niagara Falls. Pretty normal destination for a day trip for us. I will argue the view is better on our side. And so it's Queen Victoria Park, and I'm looking at photos, but gorgeous. This park is literally gorgeous. I can see what Armanda is saying. It features Queen Victoria Park is home to a collection of iconic green spaces, attractions, landmarks, and restaurants, bounded by the Horseshoe Falls and popular Falls View tourist district. You'll find a beautiful rock garden, hanging baskets, hybrid tea, rose garden, and attractive floral display. So it is really beautiful. I'll add a link into the show notes. Also, if you have ever gone to the light display in Niagara Falls, it's that park. And of course, we don't see the flowers in December. Everything's usually, hopefully, covered in snow. So, Queen Victoria Park.
Right across the street, there's this beautiful garden that I think was Princess Anne they made it for. And so you can imagine just how pristine it is. It's a beautiful area. I would be missed to not encourage everyone to go see it, although it's changed quite a bit. When I was a child, you could run through there freely, and it was in fact a garden on the side. It was a patio, so to speak, and it has beautiful water. But my sisters and I, we would say, okay, this one's my apartment. You get the one around that bend. And we would play house in this beautiful garden. And I was pampered with this view of the falls to my left while I played in a little sprinkler on the right. And it felt like a royal palace. And that's what it can do, is you can easily transform it into that. Michael tends to do a lot of like flower pot holders that are the flowers are falling out. Right now we have some started, and it's going to be, I forget which plant he put in there. We have some ginger in there. I know that was, so we like to mix our things. There's a great book I read that it was called When a Tomato Falls in Love with a Carrot. And it's a certain ideal about how to garden itself and placements, and creating smells to deter animals. And I have to say my garden story is often private. I watch those weird documentaries on dirt that kiss the ground and all the ones about mushrooms, and it's just I feel like it's something that's always been so deeply a part of me. I don't know how to not have it with me all the time. And with the art, I say if all you do that day is draw one little picture and then hang it on your tree, it's a better day. It's a better day no matter what. When you walk by your yard, you're gonna feel better because you looked at that and went, I did that. Today I accomplished that. And that in itself is amazing because art's always been used to express how we view our own world. And so for me, I think plants are art in themselves. It's like a gift of art from the ground. And it's such a privilege just to watch all their different stages as they grow. And I photograph it alongside because I'm a little bit obsessed with it. And I think it's important to stagger, even as far as just staggering your plants and how they interact with one another, that we can have beans alongside the morning glories. That's Michael's genius, not mine. But it was so that they can support one another, but they wrap around one another. And in the end, they make this gorgeous, beautiful view of a wall. And so if you're looking for a way, and for years, instead of having curtains, I used to let the tree be my curtain until I had to get the branch, which broke my heart. But I saw pieces of that tree. I will say I'm a little odd though, because I also have a piece of every Christmas tree that I've had that was alive. I make them, I keep it. I know which one was Henry and which one was Paul and which one was Peter. And I name them. So as much as it's decorating a Christmas tree all year round, except you decorate all your trees and show them the same love. That
So,
to me is art in the garden.
would you have any other advice for folks who maybe want to embrace their artistic side when they're in nature based settings, especially when it comes to engaging children?
I think for children, there's all kinds of things you can do. There's great art you can make with it. I have a friend, Robin, actually, who works through, she runs the kitchen for Gifts of the Heart,
Yep.
and she's also on my committee. Brilliant woman. She keeps dried flowers. And because of that, I was able to borrow some dried flowers. But I have a group of people that I know are very similar minded. And so now I'm like, how do we do that all together? Because I've learned so much from Robin. So part of what I do is I have the courage to just go to anyone and say, hey, I think what you made there is great. How would I be able to do that? So it's almost, if you're looking for something to do with your children in the garden, it's a world of opportunity because children love dirt and they love to play in dirt. And so you know that they want to know about dirt. It's easy to tell them about what kind of dirt you have because they're willing to hear it. But the pride on a child's face when they grow their own plant and they get to eat from that food after, it's amazing. And so I think that's the gift. And if I was going to do crafts with children in the garden, I would be making sun catchers. I would be making just as much as taking the flowers you have and teaching them how to store them in a way that they can preserve them and make art from it. That's very much the same type of expression in a different way. You could paint your garden with your child and just have them paint what it looks like to them to be able to see it from their perspective. But if you want to start doing, you can do lattices, the same type of rope work you would do with a child or a lattice, not to a child, but to a lattice. Child can do in bracelet making. So we know that that's a transferable information. I mean, instead of doing your lattice in a tight string and just tying it the way you would normally, you could ask your child to go ahead and make a bracelet for it and use that as long as you have the right material. And you would have this beautiful rope going through your lattice. And it's not necessarily something that takes too much effort because I believe everybody already wants to be involved. And there's so many things you can do. Like when you dry out any piece of wood, It depends on the age of the child, but my nephew was carving wood ever since he was a kid. He's always been passionate about nature. And even our whole family has always done that. We're just people that express that way. And so it's hard without taking you for a whole tour of the things we do. But I can assure you that nothing I've done is too sophisticated for a child to do.
We'll have to get some photos from you.
Yeah, I mean, I've taken some gemstones that were on hooks and just I've taken old earrings. That's how simple it can be, and hooking them up to different parts of the garden. Last year, I made a whole fairy village on one side with just recycled materials, all wood and rocks, and then the other side, and it's just a few details of painting a little sign or what have you, but it's a very simple thing to do. I would recommend taking your child out and watching them, see what they're interested in, and then finding a way to explore that further with them. That I think is the best advice you can say. And I would do that for yourself. What plant do you really love? How do you pay homage to that then? How do people know you love that plant as much? You can not just by its look and living freely. It's very easy to take a little thread and hang a bird, or I have butterflies for one of my neighbors, and some people bring me things. So now I have a cow jumping over the moon. It's originally a little toy sheep that I guess associates himself as a cow now because that's how he got painted. And now he's jumping over a moon made out of sticks.
Amazing. Those are some really great ideas for incorporating art in the garden. There's also people who use plant choice to also make art. I don't know if you've recently driven past the city's display. I don't know what the park's called. Gonna have to insert it here. But just when you go over the Lorne Bridge into West Brant, immediately on the right there in front of the Parks and
I
Rec
knew which
office.
garden that was until you said it. No, I don't.
Yeah, you're gonna have to go. Every year
It's
they
the
do
Lorne
some sort of,
Bridge.
yeah, just over
It's
the
the
Lorne
Lorne
Bridge.
Park.
Yeah, Lorne, it must be Lorne Park. I'll put a little insert in here. Hey, so this park is called Lorne Park. It's located in Brantford beside the Lorne Park Bridge. And the displays are beautiful. I do want to make a note that there's also beautiful displays at Glenhurst Gardens here in Brantford, where the art gallery is. And I also want to give the horticulture staff of Brantford a shout out because they ended up receiving 4 out of 5 blooms during the Community in Blooms competition this year. So congratulations to the horticulture team and everyone who's been involved in that project. So it every year they do some sort of display. Last year was Year of the Garden. This year they're doing Communities in Bloom and the theme is orange, but they've focused the space as homage to Alexander Graham Bell because there's a big anniversary this year for the Bell family. They're doing a big festival at the Bell House in July. And there's actually literally made out of flowers as images. There's words. There's an old rotary telephone there. And you can see it because it's kind of up on the hill as you're driving past. And of course, they use that entire park for beautiful displays. If anyone's been to Glenhurst Gardens, they have the art gallery there, but also the gardens themselves are used for big, beautiful, artistic flower displays that are put on by Parks and Rec. If you've ever been on the GO train down to Union Station in Toronto, you will drive past on Lakeshore, you'll drive past their big, beautiful advertisements that are made out of flowers and stuff like that. There's different ways to use the actual plants that you're growing in artistic ways. In my own personal garden, I also grow cut flowers and I used to separate them, but now I intermingle them as long as they're not poisonous. And I try to make the garden aesthetically pleasing while also being very fruitful. And then I'm able to go and cut it, usually a couple bouquets a week, and put bouquets and bring that art into my home or bring that art onto the patio or gift that art. I just brought a big bouquet to my mother-in-law. There's also, in addition to bringing art into your garden, there's a way to take what you're growing and turn that into art as well and put on displays and things like that. And I'll put some photos of some of the displays that the city has up right now. I'll put some photos in the show notes too, so people can go check it out.
They should also check out, I don't know if you've seen it, and I believe it's Cambridge. They have a wall of plants. I'm going to double check that while we speak.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
there's
they have
also
a living
one.
wall, and I love living walls. It's my next goal. If you ever do a seminar on that,
Okay. Noted, noted, I've got you. There's 2 living walls in town that I can think of. City Hall has a living wall. I don't know if it's still functioning as of
Oh,
this summer, but they had a living wall down in New City Hall when you walked in
that's
immediately in the
right.
lobby, there
It
was
was
the living
gorgeous.
wall on the left. And then also, I don't know if it's Conestoga or Laurier, it's either the college or the university, but in one of their buildings when you're driving down Dalhousie, it's on the right, you can usually see it. They have a big living wall in there, and I remember one of the students told me last year that it was dying, but I drove past it the other day and it looks beautiful. So
Good.
somebody must have come through and and revived it. But yeah, living walls are really gorgeous. I know the University of Waterloo has a really big one as well. For folks who are listening, a living wall is essentially a vertical garden. If it's indoor, it's often tropical plants. But the idea is that sometimes there's a hydroponic system behind it that keeps everything watered. But it's essentially a big wall of plants that are, I guess the plants are laying horizontally in a vertical wall system. They're very beautiful and there's a million ways that you can execute them. And it's just a really cool way to bring nature into an inside space.
I agree. I think I probably should mention that I'm from the Niagara region originally. I guess in my garden story, I'm from the Garden City.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is the Garden City. Yep. Yep.
Actually, my grandfather was integral in helping the rock garden be put in. So
That's amazing.
we are
So yeah.
garden people.
Just as we're wrapping up here, do you have any examples or stories that you've personally experienced pertaining to sharing within the community that you want to share? You know, earlier you talked about the small community garden that your road has put in and sharing with some of the folks who maybe can't necessarily garden at home or can't commit to a bigger organization, the work that, say, Branching Out Branch is doing. But any other experiences or stories that you wanted to share?
I think that once you start gardening, it is instantly a world opener. No matter what, it's you're opening your own eyes to the plant first off, and you can learn a lot. I think that if you take the time, I mean, it probably sounds absurd, but it's a meditative thing for me. I can look at a plant and I understand how it's grown, it's come to be because I germinated it and I've nurtured it and to help it get better. And while I'm nurturing those plants, they're nurturing me back, right? So it's almost like a personal conversation you have. But the second you have that personal conversation with yourself, every other gardener who exists and every other curious mind who wants to know will become a part of your village almost. And for me, I learn a lot from my neighbors. One of my neighbors, Tracy, is positively brilliant with plants, and so we'll do plant exchanges. And so that's something that I can say is an immediate thing that opened up to me. The second I told the world I had one beautiful plants came and came and came. And now, like for instance, the other day, I didn't have a spider plant. So my neighbor has a spider plant, but we are share alike. And I will say because of that, now there's 5 of us with new baby spider. And I think that's what I would say. Even when we were walking through the community garden recently at the Friendship House, you end up stopping to talk. And there's no greater resource you can give people than your time. There's so many people who sit in fear. And so this morning, even I said to somebody, please allow yourself to face and have the bravery to face that own insecurity of fear, because the brilliant things that are withheld from you and withheld from the world is caused by that fear. And so I say get out there and just garden because if nothing else, it'll lower your blood pressure. Your doctor will be happy. But if your end goal, I mean, if you're somebody like me, I'm very much a hermit at times, and I'm somebody who really needs to rejuvenate in silence. But I never feel alone in garden. That's a blessing that I was gifted very young, and that it can provide for so many families. When we go to Branch Out Brantford, we are helping people who may not necessarily be able to actually tend to their own trees anymore. We had a lady, she was the first time I went picking, and it was terribly hot. And we got to her house, and she told this beautiful story about how the tree was there. She's allergic to apples, they give her heartburn. But every year, that apple tree would bloom, and she would pick it. And with all the love in her heart, despite the fact that she was allergic to them, she would cook these big pies for her husband because apple pie was his favorite. So it was his job to tend to the tree. And as she was facing her first anniversary without him, she was facing rotten apples all over the ground. And so that's making her experience of life every time she moves her door a reality that's harsher than it needs to be, for instance. And so you can take great, like for myself, I was overjoyed to be sweating like a pig, picking apples in a tree because I know just that little bit of time I'm giving is giving her a better quality of life every single day. And
Yeah,
there's
better
very few
association with her
things you can
memories
do.
too.
And there's very few things in the world that can give you that opportunity to do so much for someone else. And it's really easy. It's just picking up a fruit from the ground, and then it's taking all the fruits that she no longer wants because she can't eat them and giving them to different organization. It's like the ladybug pantries and helping people in the community do things. From those apples, I have pictures of 6 of my neighbors sitting in a circle. Some of them, they don't even normally talk to each other, but they're all peeling apples because I've agreed to bake pie and applesauce for everyone if they help out, but they're not allowed to have a piece of pie unless they do. And so they all sat around for 4 hours on a Saturday afternoon, and they peeled apples after apples, pounds of apples, so that they wouldn't get wasted and they would go to people. And I'm sure that for that woman, as much as it's great pleasure to leave her door every day and not see the mess on the ground and not have to live through the sadness again that way, she also gets to go to sleep knowing that her tree fed so many people. And that is such a reward that cannot be put in a qualified, like a quantified way. There is nothing you can do that will give you greater joy than to sneak in quietly, work for somebody without merit and like without attention, leave and know that you were only able to accomplish that joy for someone else because you're working alongside that great team. And they give you so much. A woman who doesn't even know me is now going, let me drive you home. It's too hot to walk. And you build this great energy that I don't believe is controlled by just that environment you're in doing it. Because now I'm telling you this story and you get to hear how great that was for her. So, as much as it's good to garden, it's very important to share those stories. And I'll have to say, it's such a privilege to speak to you today about adding art to the garden because that's my secret wish list for everyone. And to even be able to tell you that I think that's wonderful and it can give you a great joy in itself is a privilege as a gardener. Not everybody gets that great opportunity. And so I would say for everyone, if you want your yard to look nicer and you can't get there on your own for honest reasons, there were years where I couldn't garden because I had hurt my knee so bad I couldn't bend to where I needed to be. And it broke my heart, right? And it's again, we're both community minded people. And if you don't want to be on a committee, you don't want to volunteer time, please enjoy our gardens just by walking because that alone gives us great joy to know somebody is enjoying what we're putting forward. We appreciate the feedback. Good or bad, we can only get better.
Absolutely. So I have a couple of rapid fire gardening related questions if I can ask you.
I hope I can answer them.
What's one thing you dislike about gardening?
Oh, dislike about gardening? In a way, the sun, in a way, because I have lupus. So for me, I have to time when I can be outside based on the sun. So there's that. But also, what else? I hate touching worms. I have to get somebody else to do it. We collect them mainly, I suppose, but I feed my turtle with the worms I find in my garden sometimes, or we throw them back in the compost. And I hate composting. I like getting rid of the plants out of my house. I don't like the lifting of the tin to drop.
Yeah, it can be a
So
little bit gross.
that's not my favorite part of gardening.
Do you have any gardening goals this year for this season? Do you have anything you want to accomplish in your space in your garden?
The full wall without interference from squirrels.
I should show
Mm.
you my bean wall. So I have a 12 foot by 8 foot, so it's 12 feet tall 8 feet wide of strictly pole beans. And when it's done growing, my garden, the entire back portion of my garden just has this massive wall of greenery. I should send you a
That's my goal.
photo. Yeah,
We have one in the front and one in the back.
they're really beautiful. I'll throw a photo
And
in the
we
show notes too.
actually, because we were talking about art, we also, Michael put up a frame and so that the plants can grow through it. So I can photograph the frame with a new picture every day as it grows.
Oh,
And
cool.
so that's going to be fun. I can't wait to see the end of it.
I think that's really cool. It's always exciting. Like we just put the bean wall up and the beans are probably, I don't know, 4 inches tall. And today they've just started putting out tendrils to grab on. And once they grab onto the wall, it grows really quickly. But there's always this waiting period where I need a lot of patience in order for the
That's where
wall
I
to be
am.
filled out. We also, on the left side of our garden, we have a bunch of cattle panels for arches that go up and over. And then I have squash and loofah and pumpkins that go over them. And then this year, a new addition, I've relocated my tomatoes onto the right side of the garden, kind of stretching along the perimeter of the garden. And I've put in a string wall for the tomatoes to trellis up. So my garden's actually going to be enclosed on all 4 sides this year for the first time. So I'm
That's
excited to see what it looks
really
like. Yeah. What is your
wow.
favorite?
Can you post pictures of that when they grow?
Oh, of course. Absolutely. This is my follow-up to my comment about stringing up the tomatoes. So that was June Taylor. It's now October Taylor, here to tell you that it didn't work and it's my fault. So I waited way too long to string the tomatoes, so they had already started climbing around or crawling around on the ground, and it was very difficult for me to actually get them to grow upwards. I was a little bit lazy about getting the string into place and then also maintaining it. I also next year would do it differently. I'll put a picture in what I'm planning to do next year. I don't even know if I have any photos of the failed string wall because I was a little ashamed. So, can I tell you if it worked or not? It might have been user error, but it didn't work for me. What's your favorite vegetable to grow? Not to eat, to grow.
It's a fruit. Can I say fruit?
Yeah, of course.
Papayas.
Oh, papayas. Oh, cool. Yeah, those would be tropicals. I'm curious, do you have any experience growing papayas?
Oh, yeah, I've grown a few. I like mangoes a lot. Mangoes are my favorite, actually. When you open a mango seed, there is an exact replica of the original tree it came from in it, no matter what. And I love that they have about 4 or 5 seeds, up to 7 sometimes. So I find that they're easy to root. If anybody out there is listening and has a good way of keeping a mango plant alive in Canada, that'd be
A
lovely.
greenhouse.
Do you think that Equal Grounds would want one?
Yeah.
Yeah?
If you grow one, I will absolutely grow it in the greenhouse. No questions.
Remember, she said that everyone's names are
I have a few plants at home right now. The past year, since I've been hired for that project the past year, if I see a plant where I'm like, oh, that's not going to grow well in my house, but that'll grow well in the greenhouse, I'll pick it up. So I currently have, it's not an orange tree, but it grows like mini oranges. It's a really citrusy fruit. I can't remember the name right now.
Oh, I know what you mean.
I have one of those. We have lots of figs. My partner grows a fig tree from his great-grandfather, from a cutting from his great-grandfather's fig tree. So we've been making cuttings of that fig tree as well. And so I have
would
some
love
figs
a
on
fig tree.
standby, and I've also been keeping my eyes peeled for pineapple plants. I see them pop up occasionally, but I'm concerned about committing because keeping it alive until we get the greenhouse is going to be a little bit difficult. But also, if I see any pineapple or anything else that's tropical and fun, absolutely. One of my big hobbies is tropical plants. I have hundreds of tropical plants in my home. So lots of cuttings and things like that to be able to kind of incorporate into the greenhouse space without infringing on our ability to grow food. So kind of same idea, bringing art, the idea of
But it is food.
art into this. Oh yeah, those things are food. I mean things like tropical plants that don't actually fruit. Stuff
Oh,
like
I
that.
see.
Yeah. What is your favorite vegetable to eat?
Lettuce. I mean, I'm a big greens girl. I crave it. I crave tomatoes with salt. I crave cucumbers. I don't know that I have a favorite vegetable. That's the thing. I thought about that when I read the question. I don't think I have. I don't play favorites with things I like. How's that?
That's fair. What's a vegetable you do not like? You will not
That
touch
one I
it
can
with a
say.
10-foot pole.
So I will say that I was not a person who liked the Brussels sprouts. I think the ones that when I bought my first home, though, I inherited a plant And the woman there was a chef who had lived there prior to me. And she said, I beg of you. I said, oh, I ate those. Those are going. And no one will eat them anyways. And she said, I beg of you, please let it grow. You've never had fresh. And I will say I was converted because she was right. You fry those up with some balsamic reduced vinegar, and oh, every green is lovely. So when I was a child, I hated asparagus, but now I can eat it. And so I think as I grew them, I liked them more.
Yeah, amazing. And then is there anything that you have been struggling in your garden with this season?
The squirrels,
The squirrel.
they are extra vivacious
Yeah.
and they're not afraid of me. So we have two baby squirrels that live in a tree behind me. They have taken to me, and I'm not sure why, but I could be inches away and she still doesn't run. No fear at all. And so we have one-on-one conversations about it. And since then, she's been out of my backyard, or at least she does it when I'm not looking.
Mm.
But I can still see the wreckage. And we do have squirrels. And actually, last week I saw a fox running by. So
Ooh.
it's beautiful.
We said you back
It
up
was
single
during the
train
full
tracks.
moon. I thought that must be a sign. Good things are coming.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so grateful for you sharing all of your tips and tricks and sharing your experience with art in the garden. And we hope some folks take some of this information and go kind of tug on their artistic side when it comes to their gardens.
Or at least come see the greenhouse.
Yes, please, please, please,
And then
please
they can see
come
our
down
art.
to Echo Place and see the greenhouse when it opens. You can
Come get
follow.
dirty with us.
Yeah, you can follow Eco Ground on social media for those updates. Now, Armanda, if anyone does want to keep up with your work, is there anywhere they can find you online?
So I am author Armanda on Instagram. As I've written, I publish books. And then I am on Facebook with my full name. And then if you look through Facebook itself, I would really encourage you, rather than following me directly, just following the Eastward Echo Place Neighborhood Association. We have all kinds of things, not just gardening that we do. We've had Zumba. I myself brought forward an exact English sign language class. So we have a variety of things. It's not necessarily gardening. Gardening is not the only thing we do. And if you've heard this, feel free to come up and say hello if you know me and let me know what you thought of it. But I would say follow the pages online, your neighborhood associations, as well as ours. I like to think we have the best. I know that Homedale's pretty good, though.
Hmm. There's a lot of really cool neighborhood associations. I've gotten to know quite a few of them, and each of them have their own ways of doing things, their own ideas, and every neighborhood association is a little bit different. And there's different stuff going on. So I told the Brantford Station Neighborhood Association, don't be surprised if you start seeing me show up at your events, because technically, like, I'm in Homedale and we border Brantford Station, and it's literally just Brant Ave that separates us, and I'm just across from there. I'm just behind BCI. I'm nice and nearby, so I'm like, you're like an off branch of my neighborhood.
That's right. It counts.
That was amazing, Armanda. Thank you so much. I am very much inspired for some elements that I want to include in the Greenhouse and Learning Center when it comes to art, and maybe a couple of community art projects that we can use for the garden space. Armanda, it was incredible to speak with you. I'm so grateful for you inspiring us and talking to us about your passionate art in your garden. And for folks listening, there's some really great photos in the show notes, so you can go check those out at thecommunitygardenpodcast.ca. Now, before I leave you today, I want to leave you with a little bit of gardening wisdom. And today's tip is going to be especially crucial when you are planning a garden. So for folks that maybe have moved to a new space and it's time to implement a new garden, or maybe you're really, really struggling with your garden, today's tip might help. People really underestimate the importance of sunlight when it comes to vegetable gardening. Vegetables need a lot more sun than most ornamental gardens need. So you want to ensure that anything on the south side of your planned garden is not going to be casting a shadow directly onto your garden throughout the day. I recommend that, especially if you're in the northern hemisphere right now, as we go through winter and spring, really check to see the path of the sun. Where is it hitting your garden the most? Of course, that path is going to change slightly when we get back into summer, but pay attention to where your sunlight tracks in your space, wherever you're growing. And then also assess where the big buildings and the big trees on your property are. So if your big buildings are all on the south side and you have your garden tucked real up close to that building, it's going to be casting a big shadow onto your garden. Keep in mind, just pay attention to the track of the sun. Now, most vegetables need, truthfully, 14 to 16 hours of sun. We're talking tomatoes, peppers. Keep in mind, these things come from the Mediterranean. Now, when we get to greens like lettuce and spinach, you can usually get away with 6 to 8 hours, but anything less than that, and be realistic, be honest with yourself, anything less than that, and you're going to start to have really leggy plants. You can usually get away with 8 to 12 hours of sunlight for the general population of plants. If you're noticing your plants are really struggling and you're kind of like, I don't know if they're getting that much sun, or if you notice that your plants get really, really tall, or they put out really long branches without a lot of foliage and they don't fruit well, it may be because you don't have enough sunlight. So I'll leave that with you as you are planning your gardens for next year. Thank you again to the City of Brantford and the Brant Community Foundation for funding this podcast. And also a big thank you to Equal Ground's Board of Directors for letting me run with this project. The Community Garden podcast is administered by Equal Ground Community Gardens, and you can view this episode's show notes at thecommunitygardenpodcast.ca. Podcast production and editing is by Matt Wilfred at Nuthatch Consulting, and you can get in touch with Matt at nuthatchconsulting@gmail.com. Now, I realized I haven't been including this in the show notes, so if you're like, oh shoot, I've been meaning to send Matt an email, I'm going to pop it in the show notes for you. And our graphic design is done by Ben at All Day Breakfast. Thank you to our lovely podcast committee, Paulina, Charlene, and Kat, for all your hard work. If you're interested in joining the podcast committee, the workload really is minimal. It's just sometimes nice to run ideas by people. We are going to start recruiting soon for helping line up podcast interviews. And also, we are currently looking for a volunteer to transcribe our episodes using a software and then do a visual look over of the transcriptions. We'd like to start offering transcriptions to folks who may be hard of hearing or who want to participate or follow along with a text option. So if this sounds like something you want to do, if you're a high school student and you need volunteer hours, shoot me an email at podcast@egcgbrant.ca and I can get you hooked up. Please consider following, subscribing, rating, reviewing on your podcast platform to help us reach more people. You can follow Equal Ground on Facebook at Equal Ground Community Gardens, and you can also join our Facebook support group by the same name. You don't have to be local to be in that group. And you can find us on Instagram at equal_ground. And you can learn more about our organization at www.egcgbrant.ca. And finally, if you would like to be on the podcast as a guest, you can email me at podcast@egcgbrant.ca, or you can visit the show notes page at thecommunitygardenpodcast.ca and click contact us. I would really love the opportunity to sit down and chat with you. Okay, that's it for this week. Everybody, I hope you're staying warm, bundle up, and invest in a heated blanket. It's going to change your life. Okay, bye.